what's the best way when you get someone who is interested in selling, not super motivated? How do you make sure that you can continuously extract the necessary information to move, like hopefully get an offer that week, that day?
Let's look at this more as an art versus a science. Okay, because I want you to think about it in the sense of like when you're speaking to a seller, a lot of this is the relationship and the rapport, right? Like a lot of this is the art in which you are having the conversations, the art in which you are asking specific questions, the art in which you are not too pushy and being pushy and not too pushy at the same time. Because it's a lot about trust when you're dealing with especially larger deals or really any commercial deal in general, because most people, like, look, obviously when you're in the industry, like we are, we sometimes take it for granted. We're asking hundreds and hundreds of people a week or a month the same questions. So it's kind of, we're numb to it. But imagine if you're a property owner, you have plenty of money in the bank, you don't need to sell, you got a great asset, and you're getting 20 calls a month on your property of somebody calling you out of the blue about selling your property. It's 240 phone calls. Do you get annoyed when people spam call you?
Of course.
So keep in mind that these people are like the ultimate receiver of spam calls. So just put yourself in their shoes for a moment and realize that like that's why trust is so important here. To be like, hey, I'm not just some random schmuck looking for a listing. I'm not just some random guy trying to, grab information and then try to do, waste your time. Ask a bunch of questions and then nothing ever occurs, right? So a lot of trust has to take place here. That kind of property, let's take your $10 million deal as an example, right? You call them up, you're having a good conversation, and they're like, I want 10 million bucks. How much square foot? What's the square footage on this?
47,000.
Got it. So he wants a little over 200 a foot here. Where do you think your guys are going to come in at roughly on this deal?
They're going based off of a cap rate, so we're probably gonna, he probably won't get that. That's a 5 cap, so he's looking for a 5 cap. It's if they submit an offer, it's probably going to be in the 8 or 7.5 or something like that.
So what I try to do, the difference between me and a lot of other commercial real estate brokers is that I will present an offer of 6.5 or 7 without that much information, with a lot of assumptions. Because what I'm doing here is that instead of having to wait what could be weeks or months to receive information, sometimes we know how long it sometimes takes these guys, right? Instead of having that period of time in which we don't receive any information, you're basically in this crazy loop of information you're basically waiting on, right? This infinite loop sometimes. I'll make an offer within 24 to 48 hours. So I get somebody who wants to sell their 47,000 square foot building, who wants $10 million. Maybe you got a gross income of what?
7 or 8, I think.
All right, call it 700 grand. Let's just say it nets 450.
It nets around 5 to 6, yeah.
Call it 500 grand. And by the way, if they gave you a $10 million number, the square footage, you can Google the tenants, you can see the tenants with retail. You can kind of get a gauge of the quality of them. You can ask them quickly, okay, that gross number, is that a gross income? Like, do you have all triple net leases or are they gross leases? So they're probably, in this case, it's gross leases. So you can kind of put together a ballpark idea of where he's at. So you have a rough idea in probably 1 or maybe 2 at most conversations within a 24-hour or 72-hour period of time at most. You can pretty much get as much information in as you need in order to make some type of reasonable offer, most of the time. And then you take the 500,000 and make assumptions, right? And you say to a buyer, when you call up the buyer, which now we're going to pivot to now the buyer conversation, because now what you're going to try to do is you want to speed up the timeline. You want to condense the timelines in these situations because time kills deals. You call up this buyer and say, hey, John, it's John, we've been speaking about, the fact that you've been looking for a retail building. Got a really interesting thing for you. Do you have 2 minutes for me? Yeah, I got 2 minutes. Cool. It's 47,000 square feet. The guy's looking for, the guy wants 11 million bucks, which we both know is absolutely ridiculous. But the property generates roughly $700,000-800,000 in gross income. He has not sent me financials. This is all a rough number of verbal based on what he told me. But he did kind of confirm we're in the ballpark of around $500,000 net. If all the information I just shared with you was accurate, 500K net, roughly 700, 800 grand in gross income, and it's 47,000 square feet. The tenant mix is XYZ. It's actually in your email box if you want to check it out. What type of cap rate would you make sense of offering, or are you a price per square foot buyer? Trying to get them to make an offer. Based on these details that I've provided with you, if all these assumptions are accurate, which I'm not saying they are, obviously you're going to have some contingencies, John. If all these assumptions are accurate, where could you make sense of making an offer at? And get them to write up something.
That part, which I've tried to replicate that you do. Let's say they're like, no, there's no way I'm going to write unless I see the rent roll, I see the financials. How would you pivot in that moment?
So buyer goes, I can't make an offer unless I see financials. I fully understand. I've asked the seller to provide it to me. However, this guy seems like the kind of guy where I think if we just put an offer in front of him, we might be able to move the ball forward a little bit. And if we were able to get an LOI drafted with the contingency of reviewing all financials, confirming financials, would you be able to get me an offer today? And by the way, I want to understand something, John. If they say no still, you can find a buyer who would be more than okay with putting up some type of number. Very seasoned players will do that. And maybe some seasoned players are like, listen, give me a day. Let me look at the details. You said 500K net. Okay, like I'll write that down. Okay, based on these assumptions, I can make an offer. Obviously, during due diligence, we're going to review financials. We're going to review leases. Of course, obviously, it's way easier to get it ahead of time. Of course. But sometimes it just doesn't work that way.
I've been hesitant, and then it just kind of fell off my plate of doing submitting the offers ahead of time, just based on me doing my own underwriting and things like that. I'm going based off of cap rates a lot of times, and then what their property is generating. Knowing so much what kind of value add. One of the things I do want to learn, and hopefully I can during this time, is understanding IRR a little bit better, so I have the full picture, and knowing that if I'm submitting an offer, let's say it's at a 9 cap, it still incorporates like a decent IRR or whatever. Because I do agree with you, after being in this for the time I have been in it, time has killed a few of my deals because I've been trying to get buyers to submit an offer, but they just are very squirrely, which I thought I was going to lose the deal because I submitted a triple net asset at a 9 cap, very far off from what he was looking for, able to bring his price down by 500,000. And then I pitched that out to, still at his asking price, and then we're almost under contract. So compressing timelines is something that I know I desperately need to focus on in the short order.
Listen, that offer, presenting those offers, is what I also found was the best way, the fastest way to getting a deal to a contract. Because basically we're pre-negotiating.
And I've just been so hesitant, bring a deal.
I'm getting that seller at this price initially, making an offer and pre-negotiating to get into this price because I already know a buyer has more of a chance of buying the deal here versus all the way up here. Because it's not about getting a listing and listing it. Oh, the seller wants 10 million. Let's just list it for 10 million. No, that's not the game. We want contracts. I don't care about listings. So it's like, oh, the seller wants this. Let's give him an offer here based on assumptions. And then let's get some feedback because look, every seller, it's a knee-jerk reaction. The first price out of their mouth is a knee-jerk reaction. Every single seller has some wiggle room for the most part. But it's like, why would I wait weeks, if not months, to get documents to confirm and confirm and confirm and confirm details? If I could just make assumptions day one and get them to come down $2 million, all of a sudden this guy's willing to take an $8 million offer on a 47,000 square foot beautiful retail building in a great location. Now the deal makes a lot of sense. And obviously I'm going to get into contract and put down a X amount of deposit. And then I'm going to look over, some financials, and I'm going to try to get all that done prior to even putting down my deposit anyways. Because if the guy sees you're legitimate, you can put down like, oh, hey, I'm going to offer you offer him $7 million, $7.5 million. And they're like, listen, actually, look, if you can get him to $8 million, I'll do the deal. And all of a sudden now you have a deal, that you're on the brink of possibly getting into contract. Like, before we get everything executed, can you get me over some leases in the P&L? Yeah, absolutely. Now he's more motivated in his head because he knows you're legitimate, right? Because you've built the trust layer.
Yeah, I guess one of the things is my concern of screwing the relationship by trying to submit a lowball offer. However, and I think at this point, it's like, it doesn't even matter. Like, sometimes I'm noticing it myself. Like, sometimes it doesn't even matter about that because you'll call them back and you're like trying to protect the relationship and they forget who you are anyways. Who are you again? Oh, tell me.
Number one, you're one of a million brokers in the location. Okay, number one. Number two, right. Most of the time they want a crazy high price because it only sounds ridiculous, like a quote lowball. Only quote sounds like a lowball because the seller actually is highballing you, right? Is giving you some ridiculous number. So when I actually come at it at a realistic number, which by the way, at the underwriting training, you literally watched me give a guy, like I underwrote a deal, pencil back in the napkin within 3 minutes, just like a bank would underwrite it almost to a T. Right, so I'm actually I'm not lowballing anybody. I'm actually just evaluating it the same as a bank would and providing them with a true legitimate offer of what true value is today based on current interest rates. So it's not really lowballing. But it's like providing an actual true legitimate number because 9 times out of 10 when I make an offer, I know a buyer will actually make the same offer. And it's not lowballing when it's actually legitimate. It's only lowballing is perception. Lowball is perception. It's not like if you have a legitimate offer, right? He can perceive it as a lowball, but that's only because he thinks the price is here. And whether I provide comps or all this type of BS data that this guy might want to look at to provide, to show him that it might be not a lowball, it doesn't matter. Because like if a guy wants 10 million bucks, it's like, okay, Between you and I just see more value in having 90+% of my leads. Sure, I'll burn a bridge with five or so percent of people. But I'm going to share the full thing. I would rather have 90+% of my leads at an actual, true, legitimate number that they will accept within 24, 48 hours, maybe 72 hours at most, because I submit that offer first and then I can actually gauge them on where they're at, versus having 100% of my leads take weeks, if not months, to possibly get me enough information where I can even get them an offer maybe. And on top of that, keep in mind that the vast majority of deals anyways are only happening because you submitted an offer, right? You can only get to the next step because you submitted an offer. And the only thing I'm doing is that I'm submitting an offer, the same exact offer, so John, that your buyer is going to submit, right? Call it $7 million on that retail center, $7.5 million. All I'm doing is that I'm submitting it within 24 hours and you're doing it 6 weeks later. That's the only difference. And the funny part is, dude, everyone worries about burning a bridge. I'll give you an example. I called up a guy and I lowballed him, pissed off. He was like, "You're not legitimate. Don't talk to me again." I called up I got a colleague in my office sitting right next to me. I go, "Hey, write this number down. And a week later, call him. I offered him this. Don't offer him that anymore. He wants this number." And guess what? We're going to get the deal done anyways. But he doesn't like me, but he likes my friend.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Who cares?
You get worried about like you said, you burn the bridge, but then sometimes you, like I've realized, not wanting to submit a low ball offer on a nice property or whatever, then you bring them an offer anyways and they still don't accept it anyways. So it's
exactly.
I wasted a bunch of time trying to pitch the deal out to get an offer, some interest, and then buyers move slow too. So
And also keep in mind, so John, let's define what you mean by a low ball, because I want to shift your perception for a second.
Low ball, I guess, and that's probably the wrong way to obviously characterize it, because then it creates this idea in my head that I'm doing something wrong. Exactly. But I'm submitting an offer at a cap rate that a buyer would 100% move forward with. So for me, it's like, well, I respect this person just because, we built some rapport talking on the phone. And I know that you're like, there's a hard on, like, I want, essentially, let's say, just call it a cap rate. Like I will only sell if it's a 5 cap. But then I'm just worried, like, okay, what if I submit at a 9 cap and I get him so upset that he's like, don't even waste my time, which I had had happened before.
But do you think, do you believe that some guy who's like, I want a 5 cap, and you submit a 9, which is legitimate? Obviously, if you got an Amazon as a tenant or a whole, a Home Depot, and you submit a 9, I don't know if you're gonna get that ever. I don't know if you're ever gonna get that accepted. It might be the best deal of all time. I am saying that, like, look, for those types of deals, you might go a little bit lower, a little bit more flexible. But I am saying that if someone tells you they want a 5 cap, which in this market is absolutely ridiculous to ask for, do you think that person is actually ever going to sell the property at a 5 cap?
No, they're waiting for some random person.
Agreed. So that means if you called them back in a year or two, when interest rates are maybe, luckily, knocking on wood right now, at a good interest rate where maybe a 5 cap is doable, do you think they'll remember who you are?
No.
So who freaking cares? Because I can't wait for a paycheck. The seller might be able to, but I can't.